Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Rangers Review Europa League special as we build up to a mouth-watering match on Thursday. Rangers taking on Tottenham Hotspur at Ibrox as Ange Postecoglou takes his underperforming Spurs side, if you like, to Rangers for what will be quite an occasion, I'd imagine, in Govan. To join me to discuss all things Tottenham, it brings me great pleasure to say we're joined by Rob White, Spurs blogger, author, and son of the Spurs late great legend White as well. How's it going, Rob?
It's good, thanks, Derek. And I guess pre-Sky, it would have been labelled the Battle of Britain, wouldn't it, in 1962? Rangers against Tottenham.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, it's great to have you on, Rob. It's Tottenham. I watched them last night, and fair to say they were. It was one of those games that sort of sums up Ange's time in charge of Tottenham. He's been in charge of about 18 months now, you could say, since arriving from Celtic. Very much pleasing on the eye if you're a neutral, but if you're a Spurs fan, I'd imagine you're tearing your hair out.
Well, as you can see, I haven't got much hair, but I think most of it has gone the way of being a Spurs fan for my whole life. And yeah, I'm a season ticket holder, so I was there yesterday. I live really close to the ground, and I'm not the biggest fan of Ange. And I want to like him. I like him as a person. I think I like him as a person. I like the fact that he's a pure football person. But I think that there's more and more issues that I felt were there from the beginning are being highlighted, and probably stuff that the press wrote a lot about when he was at Celtic, about the same injuries, about shortcomings when he played against really good sides that were evident in Champions League games. And I think they're coming home to roost now. So I'm not the biggest fan.
Yeah, you're not alone, I don't think, Rob, with regards to that. Seen the reaction after the Bournemouth game last week. Pretty angry response from the supporters that had headed along to that game and watched Spurs lose by a 0-0. Yesterday as well, I mean, when they went 2-0 up early on, were you thinking Chelsea perhaps there for the taking? Or was there sort of doubts in your mind that they would come back and you would lose grip on that game?
I think much like the players, actually, a lot of the people I spoke to after the game were of the same mindset. When it got to 2-0, we thought there's only one winner in this game, which is a terrible thing to admit, and that was Chelsea. I do think there's something fundamentally wrong there. I think there's no leadership within that squad, within the team. But yesterday, 2-0 up, 10 or 11, 12 minutes gone. I just don't see there's an excuse for at least not having a bit of pragmatism, looking at closing the game down slightly and looking to hit Chelsea on the break. Because one thing this Chelsea team have proved, they can score goals, but they can also concede goals, which is much the same for Tottenham. But I think it was very naive yesterday what happened.
Yeah, absolutely. That seems to be the general consensus. What is it? I mean, you mentioned there you're not Ange's biggest fan, Rob. Supporters that you know down there, do they think that he can turn this around? Or it almost seems to me like he's almost dead man walking, really.
I think it's interesting because there's various WhatsApp groups that I'm a member of, and also supporters groups that I chat amongst. And there is very much, no, this has got to be the guy. This is the one. Let's give him time. Let's give him it's a project. Let's give him another season. We can't just because we end up Groundhog Day. We end up, which it's not just us as a football club. I'm bright enough to realise that, but under ENIC's tenure, we've had, I think it's 14 managers in 21 years. And it does seem a bit like, here we go again. But I think I'm not saying I'm no genius at all, but I've been thinking with Ange, there's a really good rhetoric, and I think there always has been, but I don't think that rhetoric is always followed up with actions, and I think it's a very confused message some of the time. So as an example, he's complaining about the squad being thin and not having the resources, but actually he's been there 18 months. He's had 3 transfer windows, and in this year alone, I think we've got rid of or we've loaned out 13 players and we've only brought in 5. 2 of those are teenagers. So he can't have it both ways. He can't complain about the fact we're down to bare bones, and then actually, mate, to use his parlance, mate, you should be. It's negligence.
Yeah. It certainly seems that way. In terms, lost Romero yesterday. Van de Ven, of course, went off it as well. The defensive situation. How do you see Spurs lining up on Thursday, Rob? It's a weird one because he's in dire need of a win, but in terms of priorities, I don't think the Europa League would be high up in the sort of what he's looking to prioritise this season.
But it's interesting because as a Rangers fan, when your opinion, I'm going to turn it round, but when the media talk about Spurs in this tournament, they say we're one of the favourites, and I'm looking there thinking that's disrespectful to a lot of really good teams that are in this. Maybe I see Spurs too often to think, how can you make us favourites? And I think actually the centre-back conundrum is a really good example of poor management. And I know I harped on about it a second ago, but if your only 2 centre-backs that were there that were fit were Davis and Dragusin, and Davis has obviously picked up an injury, Romero's picked up another injury. So we've got Dragusin and we've got Archie Gray, who's not a centre-back, that's coming into the team. And I just think we've got players, right? We must have. Bournemouth was a really good case in point, actually. The guy that scored the winner and the guy that was man of the match was a 19-year-old Dutch player playing for Bournemouth. And you think, well, have we not got anybody coming through? We've got Phillips, who's on loan. I'm not sure where he was. He was at Plymouth. I think he's at. I don't know where he is at the moment, but he was bought specifically as a centre back. So I think we've got massive issues. And my hope is that the Van de Ven went off, and Ange was saying it wasn't. It was a precautionary. I felt it was a precautionary measure. He said he was tired, and if Van de Ven plays, it's a much better defence. But I think, as I said, I don't think he can't really moan too much about not having cover if he's the guy that actually. What have you done to create that?
Yeah.
And I'm not sure Thursday what's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, I was fortunate enough. I was at the Man City Tottenham game a few weeks ago, and I thought they were excellent that day. Man City have come off the rails themselves at this point in time. But what can you put down? That performance, they looked bang up for it. They looked brilliant. But then you watch the game last week against Bournemouth. You see the game at home to Ipswich not so long ago as well, and last night. Why can they turn it on one day but then not the other?
I think it's a very complex question, and I think that the football that he plays, a lot of it is going forward. A lot of it relies upon the perfect pass or the perfect flick or the perfect thing happening. And I think that the good games, the good victories we've had, and maybe this is part of the conundrum with Ange, is actually when it works beautifully, and it is a beautiful thing to behold. When it doesn't, it's very frustrating. And I've spent a good part of the last 6 or 7 months saying to people, where is Ange ball? What is this thing? Because actually, a lot of the time, we are just passing the ball side to side in midfield. There's no speed. There's no pace. I don't think we can break teams that come to defend, which is, it sounds like a bit of an insult. It's not meant as an insult. Teams that don't let us play, then I think we then have a problem, because we don't have Maddison. We're finding out why Maddison was the price he was, because actually he's a good player. He's not top level though. That's the issue. And I don't think we have that creative player. We also evidently don't have a leader in that team. And you could see the way the captain's armband gets passed around. The 3 captains club captains are Son, Romero, and Maddison. None of whom, in my book, are leaders. So I think when things are going well, then, in fact, I sound like when things are going well for Spurs, it's good and it's easy. When things are going badly, there's too many players out there that actually want to hide and don't want to do their job. And I think two of the pivotal players are the central midfielders. And again, I wasn't the biggest fan, but we got rid of Højbjerg, we got rid of Oliver Skip. We got rid of two very experienced players that have been in our squad for a long time. And yesterday, I'm thinking if Bissouma or Sarr go off, neither of whom can concentrate and fully produce 90 minutes of good football. They can produce 90 minutes of good football between them, but you don't want that from your central midfield. If they go off, who comes on? It's and that's almost the same thing I've been saying about our centre backs. So I think there's a frustration with Spurs. When they're good, they're very good, and when they're poor, which is more often than not, they're inexplicably poor.
Yeah, I can imagine it's very frustrating as supporters. In terms of Thursday, then, Rob, Europa League, they've been pretty decent enough in the Europa League. They haven't been scintillating by any matter of means. Draw with Roma last time out. Narrow win, of course, against Ferencváros. Beat Karabag quite easily. Lost away to Galatasaray. How are the fans viewing this game up at Rangers, who themselves have had their own problems domestically, but in Europe they seem to be a different animal, and they seem to turn up and put in performances?
I think the general thing is that people want to be excited by this game, a bit like they want to be excited by Ange ball or whatever. But I think now that we're at a point where, because the results have gone so badly recently, and because the performances have been so bad, like you can't play 10 or 12 minutes against Chelsea and claim that as a good performance. So I think there's a desire for people to be really excited about this game. I mean, Tottenham versus Rangers, people should be excited about this game, but I think there's a degree of trepidation as to what is going to happen, because we're just seeing it quite often at the moment, and it seems a little bit rudderless, the whole thing.
Yeah, interesting. In terms of team selection, can you see him making many alterations to the side that started at the weekend? Of course, injuries will dictate, I'd imagine, but can you see maybe some fringe players getting a run
out? I don't know, actually. I don't. That's a good point. It really depends what his priority is. I don't think he's got an awful lot of choice, as I've highlighted by the midfield pairing, Bissouma and Sarr. It will probably have to be Bissouma and Sarr again, unless he brings Bergvall in. Archie Gray will end up playing probably 3 different positions in a game, which is very confusing for an 18 or 19-year-old guy who's a very good footballer. How to ruin a footballer. And, unfortunately, we've got Fraser. Fraser Foster's been one of our better players in the last 3 games. So I don't think there'll be a lot of rotation. I really don't think there's going to be able to, because I think this is a game we really do need to win. Yeah,
I was going to say that. I mean, he's not really got any wiggle room, has he? He's not really got much credit in the bank. And I mean, we're looking at whether he'd make it up to Glasgow and return to Ibrox, really, given the pressure that he is under. But can you see Levy just sticking with him for now?
I saw the irony of him getting fired after losing at Ibrox, and I'm sure a lot of Rangers fans would love that. I think that there's probably a slightly more pragmatic approach from Levy would be to wait until the Manchester United. We're playing United in the Carabao Cup quarter-final Thursday week, and I think to totally unsettle things before that, if he's going to push the button, Levy, then I think he would probably wait to see what happens with that, because it makes some sense. Who knows?
Yeah, jury very much out, and what is going to happen with regards to that. But it's interesting to say the least. But as you can imagine, as Tottenham fans, Rob, it's a bit of a roller coaster at this moment in time. When he came in last season, obviously was a bit of a media darling. Everyone was enjoying his sort of fresh approach to interviews and press conferences and the likes. But I guess that is that maybe running a wee bit thin at this moment in time from fans are just a bit upset and frustrated about how it's going. What is it, the future, do you reckon? You mentioned there about 14 managers in 21 years. I mean, there's a lot of talk with the current Rangers manager about he was still under pressure, of course, but the casing point to keep him was you can't keep sacking managers. It's not necessarily a strong case to keep someone that's underperforming, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I think when Ange arrived, I think there was an awful lot of positivity, and actually, I think he's a very clever man in the fact that he got a lot of the press on side. There was this. He's good for a soundbite. Everybody's his mate. I personally think there's a lot of passive aggression behind that, and I think that is still at the moment with the press that's still serving him quite well. It was interesting to see Jamie Carragher talking directly about time for change of ownership yesterday, and I think at the moment Ange is being given a soft ride. I would call it a soft ride by the press. I don't think anyone's asked him the questions that I've posed about why the squad is short. Yeah, I think I've probably gone off your question a little bit, but off topic. But I do think that, personally, I don't think that he's got what it takes. And I think that I can understand the stage that he was at in his career. I don't think that offer is going to come up many times to manage in the Premier League. And I do think that managers must be guilty of effectively listening to whatever the chairman has to say and saying, yes, I can work with that. I don't need to bring my own backroom staff in, which is what effectively he's brought a few people in. But I think the implicit understanding, my implicit understanding is that he was going to work with the Spurs backroom staff. Yes, I can do that. Yeah. I can work with the squad we've got. Yes, I can do that. But I think for him, it was just like, this is my only opportunity to get a foot into the Premier League. And I think, if I'm being really brutal, I think he's been found out.
Yeah. Were you on board when he was appointed at the time, Rob, when Spurs went out and got him? Were you a big fan of that appointment?
Because of anybody I talked to that was a Celtic fan, they absolutely loved him. They loved the brand of football. And when people say with no respect, and I'm going to, without disrespect, and I'm not disrespecting Scottish football, I probably am. But actually, there's a massive difference between doing it in Japan, Australia, Greece, Scotland to the Premier League. And I don't know that Ange has fully grasped, he probably has fully grasped that, but I think he's probably, as an individual, I think he's probably quite scared and quite anxious and quite probably, it's a horrible phrase, but I think he's out of his depth. I really do. Yeah. And I think he's probably, having spent time living in Australia, I think he's probably too stubborn and too set in his ways to really reach out for help.
Yeah, interesting. How do you see it going on Thursday, Rob?
After being so negative, and we could win 4-0, we could lose.
Yeah, I know.
We could lose 4-2, and being 2-0 up after 89 minutes. That's me being a Spurs fan. I really don't know. I just think what I've seen in the last month, the last 6 weeks, which does include that Manchester City game, I'm just so confused by what is going to happen. But I think I've reached a point where I'm actually so disappointed that I'd rather go into a game thinking we're going to lose it than thinking we're going to win it. But I think it's going to be it will be a really interesting perspective, especially as, he did have quite a decent set of results against Rangers, I think, when he was a Celtic manager. It'll be interesting to see what he can do with taking a Tottenham team up there. We've got some really good players. Make no mistake about that. But we've also got some very average players. So, if you want me to give a scoreline, I could sit here all day and not give a scoreline.
It could be anything, I think, on Thursday. And while we've got you on, I mean, you've got that brilliant backdrop behind you. I did touch on there. Your late great father, John White, of course, former Spurs in Scotland legend. I first came across you, Robin. I read your wonderful biography on your father, The Ghost. It was actually recording a video ahead of the Benfica game. We had a Rangers fan on that lived out there in Lisbon, and he shared a great story about your dad getting him onto the Rangers bench for a European game. I think he knew Scott Simon or someone back in the day. But the book's a fantastic read, and you've taken it to the stage as well in the last, last year or so. You took it to the stage. Was it a huge success?
Yeah, it was brilliant. It was because this July 21st this year was the 60th anniversary of my dad's death, the accident that he was struck by lightning. So I wanted to do something to commemorate that, really. And it's a weird thing, but I searched my brain, and the thing I came up with was getting a stage play put on, and it was a 1 hour 1-man play. The character, the actor, the fantastic actor, played the two main characters are myself and my dad, which is the ghost. The book is sort of, it tells my story of growing up as well with the dad I didn't know, and my story even to this day, really, of trying to find out more about my dad and how that's quite confusing, but actually how it's quite enlightening. So the play was, we had the premiere was at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, not in the stadium, at the press auditorium of the stadium on the actual day of my dad's death, which was it was a beautiful thing to be able to do. And then it went up to the Edinburgh Festival, so it was up there for the whole of August, which was absolutely brilliant. We played to really good packed houses. We got really good reviews. We got and it was lovely just to keep the story going, I think, and just to see people's reactions. Met loads of people who either saw my dad play or had heard the story. It was absolutely beautiful, a beautiful thing to be involved with, and I feel quite privileged to have been in a position to have be able to play a part in getting that to be a thing.
Yeah, fantastic. And the book has been restocked as well, hasn't it? The book, you can go and buy it.
It has, yeah. The book's still out there. It's still got a great life of its own. And it is, again, something I'm really proud of. I was lucky enough to be introduced to my co-author, Julie Welch, and Julie's a massive Spurs fan. She's the official Spurs biographer, and that's how it came to be written. And it's still available. And I would say this, but people, it does get really good reviews, and it's more than just a football book. Actually, it's a really it's a story about dads, and it's a story about fathers and sons, and it's a story about loss and families, and there's a lot going on in there.
There's also a bit of a Rangers connection as well. When I was reading it, I almost thought a missed opportunity for Rangers, that they really should have spent a bit of money and got this guy in at Ibrox. He'd have been a real fan's favourite, because he certainly was at Spurs and of course Scotland as well. Yeah, well, one of the sort of pivotal moments of the play actually is Cal, the actor. He sort of plays my dad, part of going back to Rangers when in the Cup Winners' Cup in '62, and the sort of anger that he brought across that was there within my dad, because when he was at Rangers, he was watched. Well, depends on the stories, but he was watched up to about 40 times by Rangers over the course of his career. And there's a guy called Jimmy Smith, who would probably mean a lot more to you. He was Rangers chief scout at the time. And he watched him 13 times alone when he was at Alloa, and he moved from Alloa to Falkirk. And he decided not to recommend that Rangers bid for my dad. And I think there was a resentment there, which was actually, I think part of that, it was laid to rest because he scored 2 goals in the first leg. In November 1962, and then actually, I don't know if you know, he was unwell for the scheduled date for the second leg, so he wouldn't have traveled. He didn't travel to Glasgow for the second leg, and because of the fog, the game wasn't played. So it was moved a week. So my dad actually did play in the second leg on December the 12th. So there is a big Rangers connection. Actually, if I can can I just read something out? Is that all right? Yes, absolutely.
Doing some research this morning, and there was a great quote there's an article from the Scottish Daily Express, Tuesday, October the 30th, 1962. And there's a piece by Jim Baxter. And this was the day before the first leg. I think it was, the first leg. I know it must have been the second leg, actually. It's the day before the second leg. And obviously the leg was, anyway, the end of the piece is, so this is Jim Baxter speaking. He says, but let Dave Mackay and his pals remember this. When Rangers take on foreign opposition, they fight for Scotland as well as for Rangers. And the fact that there are deserters in the opposition camp will make us fight even that harder. As for Dave's personal challenge for that place in the Scottish team that I hold proudly, I wish him well. I imagine he has been fighting for that place all along, and I haven't lost any sleep over it so far. And of course, that was the time where the Anglos thing was in place. So there was an awful lot of ill feeling around this game as well. And I don't know how or where you are, but unfortunately my mum's passed on now, but she recalls time, like my dad getting hate mail basically from Rangers fans around the time of that game. And you think, when you hear about trolling now and all of this stuff, effectively that stuff was going on back then. And I think it was heightened by the anti-English feeling that was stirred up by the Scottish FA at the time. But yeah, interesting and also what a massive game it was.
Huge. Tottenham was some side back then as well, weren't they? I mean, they really were.
They were, with three fantastic Scots in the team, which, maybe we should have some Scots in this team. I'm not sure. and actually, there's another little bit which will. So this is from the Scottish Daily Express, Wednesday, October the 31st. Actually, I haven't got them all from that. And my dad's saying, but my greatest hero of all. Hang on a second. I'll rewind slightly. He says, I remain devoted to Scottish football, partly that sentiment. I shall never forget the night I was transferred from Musselburgh Union to my first junior club, Bonnyrigg Rose. There are, I still insist, more good footballers and fitter athletes in Scotland than England. And the little hero worshipping I have permitted myself in the game is all directed across the border. Gentleman Jimmy Mason of 3rd Lanark was my first hero, both for his magical ball control and his impeccable behaviour on the field. Archie Murphy and Willie Vint, who played behind me in 2nd Division Alloa, remain in my memory as the best halfbacks I have ever encountered. But my greatest hero of all is the Rangers club. Like every other youngster learning this game of football in Scotland, I wanted to play for Rangers above all. That ambition remains. Certainly, I'd much rather play at Ibrox than for any continental club. And maybe one day I shall, when I'm about 34. And that's it. Yeah. So what could have been?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, your father was some player. I didn't have the delight of seeing him play, of course, in my lifetime, but certainly by reading the accounts and seeing grainy footage, he was a real top drawer player. And it's well worth a read, folks, at that book, The Ghost. I'll pop the link in the description below this video as well. Go and buy yourself a copy. It's well worth a read. Rob, I'm delighted we got you on. Thank you for a bit of insight into Tottenham this season. I really hope that Rangers manage to compound the misery on Ange on Thursday. I do wish you all the very best after Thursday night. But it's been great having you on. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure. And I hope that the real Spurs turn up on Thursday. Just for the football neutrals.
Yeah, it'll be entertaining anyway. I'm sure we'll get an exciting match on Thursday night. They usually are in the Europa League as far as Rangers are concerned, and with Tottenham, of course, as we've seen, very much it's one of those ones. We will be given a feast of football, but whether Rangers can emerge victorious or not, we shall soon find out. But hopefully you've enjoyed that, folks, and we'll speak to you a little later on. Bye for now.